My name is Margaret Ann Sullivan. I'm 58 years old, and I live in Portland, Oregon, in a modest Victorian house in the Pearl District. From the outside, my life looks peaceful, ordinary even. But inside, I carry a weight that has crushed my soul for over 3 decades. I have lived with a sin that I've never confessed to anyone. Not to my husband, not to my priest. Not even to myself in the dark hours of night when I lie awake, staring at the ceiling. When I was young and foolish, barely 23, I fell into a relationship that society would call forbidden. He was married. I was naive. The affair was brief but intense. Like a wildfire that burns everything in its path before dying out just as quickly. When I discovered I was pregnant, he was already gone, back to his wife and his respectable life in another state. I was alone, terrified, and unmarried in a time when such things still mattered. Deeply in small-town America. My parents had passed away in a car accident years before, and I had no siblings to turn to. The shame felt like it would swallow me whole. I couldn't face the judgment, the whispers at church, the pointing fingers that would follow me everywhere in our tight-knit community. But fate, in its cruel wisdom, had an even harsher lesson for me. I wasn't carrying just one child. I was carrying 2 identical twin girls. The day they were born was both the most beautiful and most horrifying day of my life. They were perfect, absolutely perfect. With tiny pink faces and wisps of blonde hair. Baby A came first, crying loudly and vigorously. Baby B followed minutes later, quieter, more contemplative. I held them both in my arms in that sterile hospital room. And my heart shattered into a million pieces because I already knew what I was going to do. I couldn't keep them both. I could barely afford to keep one. I was working as a waitress at a diner. Living in a one-room apartment with peeling wallpaper and a radiator that barely worked. But more than the financial impossibility, it was the fear. The overwhelming, suffocating fear of being branded as that woman. The one who had a child out of wedlock. The one who threw away her reputation for a married man. Who didn't even have the decency to stay. The social worker who came to my room was kind, with gentle eyes and a soft voice. She told me about a couple in California who had been trying to have children for years. They were good people, she said. A doctor and a teacher. They would give my baby everything I couldn't. A stable home, 2 parents, a future without the stain of illegitimacy. I made my choice in a fog of grief and desperation. I kept baby A, the loud one, the fighter. I told myself she was stronger. That she could survive whatever hardships we would face. Baby B, the quiet one, I gave away. I signed the papers with shaking hands, my tears blotting the ink. They let me hold her one last time. And I whispered into her tiny ear, "I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. Please have a beautiful life." I named the daughter I kept Sarah. Sarah Margaret Sullivan. The daughter I gave away, I never knew what name they gave her. The adoption was closed. I was told it was better that way, cleaner. No confusion for the child, no temptation for me to interfere. But you can't cut away half of your heart and expect to go on living normally. Every birthday Sarah celebrated, I thought of the other one. Every Christmas, every first day of school. Every milestone, I wondered if somewhere in California, another little girl who looked exactly like my Sarah was experiencing the same thing. The guilt ate at me slowly, like rust corroding metal from the inside out. I left that small town in Idaho and moved to Portland, desperate for a fresh start. I worked hard, kept my head down, and raised Sarah alone for 5 years. And then I met Thomas. Thomas Sullivan, a good man. A carpenter with calloused hands and an honest smile. He fell in love with both of us. Sarah and me, and he never once asked about her father. He simply said, "The past is the past. Let's build a future together." We married quietly at City Hall, and he adopted Sarah legally. She began calling him Dad, and slowly, our little family found its rhythm. But I never forgot. How could I? Every time I looked at Sarah, I saw her sister's face too. Thomas Sullivan gave us stability. He gave us his name, his home, and his unwavering devotion. We moved into the Victorian house in Pearl District when Sarah was 7 years old. It needed work, but Thomas could fix anything. He spent weekends restoring the crown molding. refinishing the hardwood floors, building bookshelves in the living room. Sarah would hand him tools and watch him work with adoring eyes. Dad, can you teach me how to use the hammer? Sure thing, pumpkin, but safety first. Those were happy years, or at least they should have been. On the surface, we were the picture-perfect American family. Thomas went to work every morning with his lunch pail. Sarah excelled in school, bringing home report cards filled with A's. I found work as an administrative assistant at a law firm downtown. We had family dinners every night. We went to church on Sundays. We took road trips to the Oregon coast in summer. But underneath it all, I carried my secret like a tumor. There were moments when it almost came out. Times when Sarah would ask, "Mom, why don't I have any cousins? Why don't we have family photos from when you were young?" I would make excuses, change the subject, redirect her attention. Thomas knew I was hiding something. He was too perceptive not to notice the way I would sometimes stare off into space. Or how I would flinch when twins appeared in movies or television shows. But he never pushed. He trusted me to tell him when I was ready. I told myself I would take the secret to my grave. What good would it do to confess now? Sarah was happy. She had a father who loved her, a stable home, a bright future. Why burden her with the knowledge that she had a twin sister somewhere out there? A sister I had given away like an unwanted puppy? Sarah grew into a beautiful young woman. She had my blonde hair but Thomas's strong jaw and determined spirit. She graduated from Reed College with a degree in graphic design, and got a job at a marketing agency downtown. And then she met David. David Morrison was everything a mother could want for her daughter. He was kind, ambitious, from a good family in Seattle. He worked as a financial analyst and had a sensible head on his shoulders. When he asked for Sarah's hand in marriage, Thomas and I both cried tears of joy. The wedding was perfect. Sarah looked radiant in her white dress. Her hair swept up in an elegant chignon. David gazed at her like she was the only person in the world. As I watched them exchange vows, I felt a deep sense of relief. Sarah had made it. She had escaped the shadow of my sins. She would have the legitimate, respectable life I had denied myself. They bought a condo in the South Waterfront District. One of those modern high-rises with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Willamette River. They talked about starting a family soon. Everything was falling into place. "Mom, I'm so happy," Sarah told me one afternoon, as we had lunch at a cafe near her office. "David is amazing. My job is going well. I feel like my life is exactly where it's supposed to be." I squeezed her hand and smiled, but inside, a cold dread was beginning to form. Life has a way of punishing hubris, of striking you down. Just when you think you've finally escaped your past. I had been foolish enough to think I was safe. I had been foolish enough to think that my sin would stay buried forever. I should have known better. Secrets have a way of clawing their way to the surface, no matter how deep you bury them. It was a Tuesday evening in October when everything began to unravel. Thomas and I were in the kitchen, preparing dinner when we heard the frantic pounding on our front door. I opened it to find David standing there, his face flushed red. His eyes wild with anger and hurt. "David, what's wrong? Is Sarah okay?" He pushed past me into the house, clutching his phone in a white-knuckled grip. "Margaret, I need to talk to you. I need to understand what's happening." Thomas came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Son, calm down. What's going on?" David's voice cracked as he spoke. "Sarah is cheating on me. I have proof." My heart stopped. "That's impossible. Sarah would never." "I saw her," David shouted, then seemed to catch himself, lowering his voice but losing none of its intensity. "I saw her with another man. Multiple times. And when I confronted her about it, she looked me in the eye and denied it. She said she was with you, Margaret. She said she was here, having dinner with you and Thomas." He thrust his phone at me, and I looked at the screen with trembling hands. It was a photograph, clearly taken from across a street. Slightly grainy but unmistakable. A woman who looked exactly like Sarah was walking arm in arm with a man I didn't recognize. She was wearing a red dress that I'd never seen before. They were laughing together, intimate, comfortable. "David," I looked at the date stamp on the photo. "This was last Thursday?" Yes. Thursday evening, around 7 o'clock. She told me she was having dinner with you too. Was she here? I looked at Thomas, and he nodded slowly. Yes. She was here. We had pot roast. She was here from about 6 until 9:30. David's face contorted with confusion and anger. That's impossible. My colleague Jim took this photo. He was downtown near Pioneer Square, and he saw her. He knows what Sarah looks like. We've all had dinner together multiple times. I stared at the photo, my mind racing. The woman in the picture was Sarah. The same hair, the same face, the same way of carrying herself. But it couldn't be Sarah. Unless. No, it couldn't be. But the cold dread in my stomach was growing into full-blown panic. David, I said carefully, are there more photos? He swiped through his phone, showing me 3 more images. Different days, different outfits, but always the same woman. Who looked exactly like my daughter. In one, she was having coffee at an outdoor cafe. In another, she was coming out of a movie theater. In the third, she was getting into a car with that same unknown man. I hired a private investigator, David said, his voice hollow now. I'm not proud of it, but I needed to know. He followed her, who I thought was her, for a week. She has an entire separate life, Margaret. An apartment in a different part of town. A job at a different company. Even a different name. What name? The question came out as barely a whisper. David checked his phone. The investigator found out she's been using the name Emily. Emily. The last name is redacted for privacy, but Margaret. How is this possible? How can Sarah be living a double life? And more importantly, why? Thomas put his hand on my shoulder, and I realized I was shaking. David, I think you should sit down. I don't want to sit down. David's composure finally shattered completely. I want to know why the woman I married, the woman I love, is betraying me. I want to know why she's lying to my face. The front door opened, and Sarah walked in, still in her work clothes, carrying her laptop bag. She stopped short when she saw David's tear-stained face. Then looked at me and Thomas with growing alarm. What's going on? David, why are you here? I thought you were working late. David showed her the photos without saying a word. Sarah's face went pale as she flipped through them. This isn't me. David, I swear to you, this isn't me. I don't know who this woman is, but it's not me. Don't lie to me. David's voice broke. How can you stand there and lie when I have photographic evidence? I'm not lying. Sarah turned to me, desperate. Mom, tell him. Tell him I was here last Thursday. Tell him. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Because I was staring at the photo, and a memory was flooding back. A memory of another tiny face, identical to Sarah's, that I had held for only a few precious minutes before giving her away forever. Oh my God, I whispered. Oh my God, what have I done? The silence that followed my whispered words was deafening. 3 pairs of eyes were fixed on me, David's filled with confusion, Sarah's with growing dread, and Thomas's with a deep, sad knowing, as if he had always suspected this day would come. Mom? Sarah's voice was small, frightened. What do you mean? What have you done? I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up completely. Thomas gently guided me to the couch. And I sat down heavily, feeling every one of my 58 years weighing on me. David was pacing now, his phone still clutched in his hand. Someone needs to explain to me what the hell is happening. Because right now, I feel like I'm losing my mind. That woman in those photos is my wife. I would recognize her anywhere. But Sarah says it's not her, and you're all acting like there's something we're not telling you, Thomas finished quietly. He looked at me. Margaret, it's time. Sarah sat down next to me, taking my cold hands in her warm ones. Mom, you're scaring me. Please, just tell us what's going on. I looked at my daughter's face, the face I had loved and cherished for 32 years. And I knew that what I was about to say would change everything. There would be no going back from this moment. The life we had built together, the carefully constructed facade of normalcy, was about to crumble. The woman in those photos, I began, my voice hoarse, I think she might be your twin sister. The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled out. Sarah's hands went slack around mine. My what? You have a twin sister. An identical twin. I gave her up for adoption when you were both born. The color drained from Sarah's face. David stopped pacing and stared at me in disbelief. Even Thomas, who I suspected had guessed parts of my secret over the years, looked shocked at hearing it spoken aloud. You. What? Sarah stood up abruptly, backing away from me. I have a twin? I have a sister? And you never thought to tell me? Sarah, please, let me explain. Explain what? Her voice was rising now, tears streaming down her face. Explain how you hid this from me my entire life. Explain how there's another person out there who looks exactly like me, and I had no idea she existed. David sank into a chair, his earlier anger replaced by stunned confusion. So that woman, that's not Sarah. That's Sarah's twin sister. That's why Sarah couldn't have been downtown when she was here with you. Because it wasn't Sarah at all. I think so, I said, my own tears starting to flow now. I don't know how she found you, or why she's doing whatever she's doing. But yes, I think that's her. Who is she? Sarah demanded. What's her name? Where does she live? How could you give her away? I flinched at the accusation in her voice, but I deserved it. I deserved all of it and more. I don't know her name. The adoption was closed. I was 23 years old. Unmarried, pregnant with twins by a man who had abandoned me. I was alone, terrified, living in poverty. I couldn't. My voice broke. I couldn't keep you both. I could barely take care of one baby. So I made a choice. I kept you and gave her to a couple who could provide for her. You chose, Sarah said, her voice flat and cold in a way I had never heard before. You chose me over her. You decided my life was worth more than hers. No, it wasn't like that. I loved you both. You loved us both, but you threw one of us away like garbage. Sarah, Thomas tried to intervene, but she whirled on him. Did you know about this? No, Thomas said firmly. Your mother never told me. I knew she was hiding something from her past, but I never knew what. I certainly never knew about your sister. Sarah turned back to me, and the look in her eyes nearly broke me. It was betrayal, pure and simple. The loss of trust between a mother and daughter, perhaps irreparably broken. My entire life is a lie, she whispered. Everything I thought I knew about myself, about my family, about where I came from. It's all a lie. David stood up slowly, running his hands through his hair. Okay, let's think about this logically. If this woman is Sarah's twin, then why is she following me? Why was she seen with me multiple times? I've never met her. At least, I don't think I have. He pulled up the photos again, studying them more carefully. Wait, these photos. The investigator said she has a different job, a different apartment. She's not trying to be Sarah. She's living her own life. So why would people think they've seen her with me? A horrible thought occurred to me. Maybe she's not trying to pretend to be Sarah. Maybe she's trying to meet you. Why would she want to meet me? Because you're married to her sister, Thomas said quietly. If she found out about Sarah somehow, maybe she wanted to know more about her family. About the sister she never knew she had. Sarah laughed, a bitter, broken sound. So what? She's been stalking David to get information about me. That's insane. People do insane things when they find out. They were given up for adoption, I said softly. The feelings of abandonment, of wondering why they weren't wanted. It can drive people to desperate acts. Oh, that's rich coming from you, Sarah spat. The woman who actually abandoned her. Her words hit me like physical blows, but I couldn't defend myself. She was right. David sat back down, his head in his hands. This is unbelievable. My wife has an identical twin that no one knew about. And that twin has apparently been living in the same city. Possibly watching us, possibly trying to make contact. What are we supposed to do with this information? We need to find her, Thomas said. We need to talk to her and find out what she wants. What she wants. Sarah's voice was shrill now. She wants the family that was stolen from her. She wants the mother who gave her away. Well, she can have her. I don't want anything to do with either of them right now. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Sarah, please don't leave, I begged, standing up. Let's talk about this. We can figure this out together. She paused at the door, her hand on the knob, and looked back at me with eyes full of pain. I've spent my whole life wondering why I sometimes felt incomplete. Like something was missing. I thought it was just normal existential stuff. You know, everyone feels that way sometimes. But now I know. It wasn't existential. It was real. Half of me was literally missing, and you're the reason why. Sarah, please. But she was gone, the door closing behind her with a soft click that sounded like the end of the world. David stood up slowly. I should go after her. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm so sorry. He looked at me with something between pity and disappointment. I believe that you are. But sorry doesn't fix this, Margaret. Sorry doesn't give Sarah back the sister she should have known her whole life. Sorry doesn't explain why a stranger who looks exactly like my wife has been apparently following me around Portland. After David left, Thomas and I sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he spoke. How do we find her? The other daughter? I don't know. The adoption was closed. I don't even know if she knows she's adopted. Well, she clearly knows something, or she wouldn't be here. People don't just accidentally end up in the same city as their biological family without knowing. He was right, of course. Which meant my other daughter, the one I had given away, the one whose name I didn't even know had found us, had found Sarah, and now she was circling our lives like a ghost, wanting something I wasn't sure any of us could give her. The question was, what would she do next? I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to Thomas, staring at the ceiling, watching the shadows from the streetlights outside play across the walls. My mind kept going back to that hospital room 32 years ago. To the weight of 2 babies in my arms, to the impossible choice I thought I had to make. Around 3 in the morning, I got up and went down to the basement. We had boxes of old papers and documents stored down there, things I hadn't looked at in decades. I pulled down the box labeled 1993 and opened it with shaking hands. There, at the bottom, was a manila envelope I had kept but never opened. The adoption agency had given it to me, saying that if my daughter ever wanted to contact me when she turned 18, this information would be necessary. I had shoved it in a box and tried to forget about it. Now, I opened it. Inside were the original hospital records from the birth. Baby A 6 pounds 4 ounces, born at 347 a.m. Baby B 6 pounds 1 ounce, born at 352 a.m. There was a footprint card for each baby. Their tiny prints pressed in ink, identical little marks that looked like flower petals. There was also a form from the adoption agency. The adoptive parents' names had been redacted, but there was a case number and a note at the bottom. Adoptive family relocated to Portland, Oregon area, 2010. My hands trembled as I read that line. 2010, 15 years ago. My other daughter had been living in the same city as us for 15 years. And I had never known. Underneath that was another document. This one more recent, dated just 3 months ago. It was a notification from the adoption registry. It stated that the adoptee had filed paperwork to unseal her adoption records and had requested contact information for her biological mother. 3 months ago. She had known about me for 3 months, and I had been oblivious. I brought the documents upstairs and spread them out on the kitchen table. Thomas came down a few minutes later, his hair sticking up, wearing his old robe. You found something? She's been trying to contact me, I said, pointing to the notification. 3 months ago, she filed to unseal her records. The agency sent me this letter, and I never even opened it. It was in a pile of mail I meant to go through. I must have just missed it. Thomas picked up the letter and read it. There's a phone number here. For the agency. They can facilitate contact if both parties agree. It's too late now. She's already found us. Found Sarah. Found David. She didn't wait for me to respond. Can you blame her? Thomas asked gently. She waited 32 years. When you didn't respond to the letter. Maybe she decided to take matters into her own hands. I put my head in my hands. I've ruined everything. Both my daughters' lives are in chaos because of my choices. Hey. Thomas pulled up a chair next to me and put his arm around my shoulders. You were in an impossible situation. You did what you thought was right at the time. Was it right to keep it a secret all these years? Was it right to never tell Sarah she had a sister? Probably not, Thomas admitted. But you can't change the past. You can only deal with what's in front of you now. What was in front of me was a mess of my own making. Sarah wasn't answering my calls. David had texted Thomas to say that Sarah was staying at their condo and didn't want to see me. And somewhere out there in Portland was a daughter I had never known, who apparently had been watching our family for months. At 8 o'clock, I called the adoption agency number on the letter. A woman with a kind voice answered. Willamette Valley Adoption Services, this is Rebecca. Hi, my name is Margaret Sullivan. I received a notification a few months ago about my daughter wanting to unseal her adoption records. I never responded, but I need to know how to contact her now. There was a pause and some typing. Let me pull up your file. Can you give me the case number? I read off the number from the document. More typing, then. Yes, I see it here. Emily Rose Patterson. She filed the paperwork in July. Since you didn't respond within the 60-day window, she was given the option to proceed with private investigators to locate family members. It looks like she chose to do so. Emily Rose Patterson, I whispered. So that was her name. The name her adoptive parents had given her. Mrs. Sullivan, are you interested in making contact with Emily? I can reach out to her and let her know you'd like to meet. Yes, please. As soon as possible. I'll send her a message today. She's been very eager to connect, so I expect she'll respond quickly. I should warn you, though reunion situations can be emotionally complicated. The agency offers counseling services. If you'd like support during this process. Thank you. I think I'm going to need all the help I can get. After I hung up, Thomas made coffee and we sat at the table in silence, waiting. Waiting for the agency to call back. Waiting for Sarah to call. Waiting for the next disaster to unfold. The call came 2 hours later. Rebecca from the agency. Mrs. Sullivan, I've spoken with Emily. She's willing to meet with you. She suggested tomorrow afternoon at a cafe downtown. Would that work for you? Tomorrow. I was going to meet my other daughter tomorrow. Yes, I said, my voice barely audible. Yes, that works. Rebecca gave me the details: a small coffee shop near Powell's Books, 2 o'clock. Neutral territory, public but quiet. After I hung up, I immediately called Sarah. This time, she answered. What do you want, Mom? I'm meeting her tomorrow. Your sister. I thought you should know. Silence on the other end. Sarah, I know you're angry with me. You have every right to be. But this affects you too. Don't you want to know about her? Don't you want to meet her? I don't know what I want, Sarah said finally. Everything is so messed up right now. David and I had a huge fight last night. He's confused and hurt, and I'm confused and hurt. And it's all because of your secret. I know. I'm sorry. Stop saying you're sorry. Sarah's voice cracked. Sorry doesn't fix anything. You're right. It doesn't. But maybe meeting her will give us some answers. Maybe we can start to understand why she's been observing your life. Observing? That's a nice way of saying stalking. Sarah, please, come with me tomorrow. We can meet her together. You and me and your sister. Another long silence. Then, I'll think about it. She hung up. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, trying to do normal things: laundry, grocery shopping, making dinner, but unable to focus on anything. Thomas stayed close, not saying much, just being present. He had always been good at that, knowing when I needed words. And when I just needed someone nearby. That night, I stood in front of the mirror in our bathroom, studying my face. What would Emily see when she looked at me? Would she see the young, frightened girl who had given her away? Or would she only see an old woman who had abandoned her? What would I see when I looked at her? Would I see the baby I had held for those few precious minutes? Or would I see a stranger, someone whose life I had no part in? I went to bed that night knowing that tomorrow everything would change again. The secret I had kept for 32 years was about to be fully exposed. There would be no more hiding, no more pretending. Tomorrow, I would face the daughter I had given away. And somehow, I would have to find the words to explain the inexplicable. The cafe near Powell's Books was one of those quintessentially Portland places: exposed brick walls, mismatched vintage furniture, local art hanging on the walls, and the rich smell of freshly ground coffee beans. I arrived 15 minutes early. my hands shaking so badly that Thomas had to drive me downtown. Do you want me to come in with you? He asked as we sat in the car across the street. No, I need to do this alone. At least at first. He squeezed my hand. I'll be at Powell's, in the Blue Room. Text me if you need me. I watched him walk away, then forced myself to get out of the car and cross the street. Inside the cafe, I ordered a tea I knew I wouldn't drink, and found a table in the back corner where I could see the door. At 155, Sarah walked in. I stood up, shocked. Sarah, you came? She didn't smile, didn't come over to me. She just stood there, looking exhausted and hurt. I had to see her. I had to know. I'm glad you're here, I said softly. She chose a table near mine but not at it close enough to be part of what was happening, but maintaining her distance from me. The message was clear. At 202, the door opened again, and a woman walked in. The world seemed to stop. She was Sarah. Exactly Sarah. The same height, the same blonde hair cut in the same shoulder-length style, the same blue eyes. The same way of standing with her weight shifted slightly to one side. She was wearing jeans and a green sweater. And she looked nervous and hopeful and terrified all at once. Her eyes scanned the cafe and landed on Sarah first. She froze, her hand still on the door. For a long moment, the two of them just stared at each other. Mirror images separated by 32 years of lost time. Then her gaze shifted to me, and I saw the flash of recognition, followed by something harder to read. Anger? Grief? Longing? She walked over slowly, and I stood up on shaking legs. Margaret? Her voice was soft, cautious. Yes. Emily? She nodded. Up close, I could see the tiny differences. A small scar on her eyebrow. Slightly different laugh lines. A freckle on her left cheek that Sarah didn't have. But essentially, fundamentally, she was Sarah's twin. Thank you for meeting me, she said. I'm so glad you reached out. I got your letter. I should have responded sooner. It's okay, Emily interrupted. I didn't really give you much time. When you didn't respond, I couldn't wait anymore. Sarah stood up and walked over to us. And now the three of us formed a small triangle. Emily looked at Sarah with tears in her eyes. Hi, Emily whispered. Hi, Sarah whispered back. They stood there, these two women who shared DNA. Who had shared a womb, who should have shared a lifetime but hadn't. Should we sit down? I suggested. We found a larger table, and I ordered more coffee none of us would drink. For a minute, nobody spoke. What do you say in a moment like this? How do you bridge 32 years of absence? Emily spoke first. I've known I was adopted since I was 8 years old. My parents, my adoptive parents, David and Laura Patterson, they were wonderful. They never hid it from me. They told me that my birth mother loved me, but couldn't take care of me, and that they were so grateful to have me. She looked down at her hands. I had a good childhood. A good life. They gave me everything, but there was always this hole, this wondering. Who did I look like? Where did I come from? Did I have siblings? When did you find out about me? Sarah asked quietly. About you specifically? 6 months ago. I had done a DNA test through one of those ancestry websites. Just curious about my ethnic background. And suddenly, boom, there was a match. A first-degree relative match. A sister. Sarah leaned forward. You found me through a DNA test? Yes. The website had your profile. Sarah Morrison. Lived in Portland. Worked in marketing. Married. I stared at your profile picture for hours. It was like looking in a mirror. I couldn't believe it. Why didn't you just contact me directly? Sarah asked. Emily's face flushed. I wanted to. I was going to. But then I got scared. What if you didn't know about me? What if you didn't want to meet me? What if I ruined your life by showing up out of nowhere? She glanced at me. So I filed the paperwork to unseal my adoption records. I wanted to talk to our birth mother. First, to understand what happened before I approached you. But when Margaret didn't respond to the agency's letter, I panicked. So you hired an investigator, I said. Not exactly. I started following you. Sarah, I'm sorry, I know how creepy that sounds. But I needed to see you in person, to watch your life from a distance. I needed to understand who you were before I introduced myself. Sarah's jaw tightened. You've been stalking me for 6 months? Not stalking, Emily said quickly. Or at least, I didn't mean it that way. I went to places I knew you'd be. Your favorite coffee shop, I found it through your Instagram. The farmer's market on Saturdays. I saw you there with your husband a few times. David, Sarah said. His name is David. I know a lot about you, Sarah. Too much, probably. I know you're a graphic designer. I know you love hiking in the gorge. I know you volunteer at the animal shelter on Wednesday evenings. I know your favorite restaurant is Le Pigeon. And you order the same thing every time. Sarah looked disturbed. That's really invasive, Emily. I know. Emily's voice broke. I know it is, and I'm sorry. But you have to understand, you were real. You were there. You existed. For my whole life, I wondered if I had siblings, and suddenly there you were, living your life. And I just wanted to be part of it somehow. Even if it was just from the shadows. What about David? I asked. The photos of you with him? The investigator said you were seen with him multiple times. Emily's face turned bright red. That was an accident. Sort of. I was at a coffee shop near his office building one day, still trying to work up the courage to introduce myself to Sarah, when David walked in. I recognized him from photos I'd seen. He was on his phone, distracted, and he bumped into me. Literally bumped into me. His coffee spilled everywhere. She paused, looking miserable. He apologized profusely, offered to buy me another coffee. I should have just said no and left. But I thought, maybe I could get to know something about Sarah through him. So I said yes. We talked for about 20 minutes. He told me about his wife, about how much he loved her, about how happy they were. He showed me photos of Sarah on his phone. He thought you were a stranger, Sarah said slowly. Yes. He had no idea who I was. But then, and this is where it gets really bad, he said I looked familiar. He kept staring at me, trying to figure out why. I panicked and said I had to go. But a few days later, I saw him again, at a bookstore. And then again at a restaurant. I wasn't following him, I swear. Portland isn't that big. We just kept running into each other. And he started to notice the resemblance, I said. Emily nodded. The last time I saw him, about 3 weeks ago, he did a double take. He said, "You look exactly like my wife." I just laughed it off and said I must have one of those faces. But I could tell he was suspicious. That's when I knew I couldn't keep doing this. I had to either come forward or disappear completely. So you filed to unseal the records and tried to contact Margaret, Sarah said. Yes. I thought if I could talk to our mother first, maybe she could help me figure out how to approach you. But when she didn't respond, I realized I was out of time. David was already suspicious. It was only a matter of time before he put the pieces together. The three of us sat in silence, absorbing everything. The cafe bustled around us, people ordering lattes, typing on laptops, having normal conversations about normal things. Meanwhile, our little corner table held the weight of decades of secrets and lies. I need to know why, Sarah said finally, looking at me. Why did you keep me and give her away? What made you choose? This was the question I had been dreading. The question I had asked myself a million times over the years. There was no good reason, I said honestly. You were born first. You cried louder. You seemed stronger. I told myself you could survive the hardship. We would face better than she could. But the truth is, it was arbitrary. Random. If she had been born first, if she had been the one who cried louder, I might have kept her instead. Emily flinched, and I saw tears rolling down her cheeks. I was 23 years old, I continued, my own tears starting. I was alone, broke, terrified, and ashamed. Our father was married. He wanted nothing to do with us. I had no family support, no money, no resources. The social worker told me about a couple who desperately wanted a baby, who could give her everything I couldn't. A stable home, 2 parents, financial security. I convinced myself I was doing what was best for her. But you kept Sarah, Emily said, her voice thick with emotion. You kept one and threw the other away. I know how it sounds. I know how it was. There's no justification, no excuse that makes it okay. I made a choice based on fear and desperation. And I've regretted it every single day since. But not enough to find me, Emily said. Not enough to try to bring me back. The adoption was closed, I said weakly. I didn't have any way to find you. You could have tried. You could have hired investigators, filed paperwork. Something. But you didn't. You just moved on with your life and pretended I didn't exist. She was right. I had taken the coward's way out. I had let the closed adoption be my excuse not to face what I had done. Sarah spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. Emily, I understand why you're angry. I'm angry too. But I need you to understand something I didn't know about you. I didn't choose this. I would have wanted to know my sister. Emily looked at Sarah, and something in her expression softened. I know. This isn't your fault. You're a victim of her choice just as much as I am. We both are, Sarah agreed. She robbed us of each other. 32 years we could have had together. And we didn't get them because she was too afraid to face the truth. I wanted to defend myself, to explain again about the fear and the shame. But what was the point? They were right. I had been a coward. I had prioritized my own comfort. My own ability to move forward and forget, over the bond between sisters. I can't change the past, I said. I can't give you back those years. All I can do is tell you how deeply, profoundly sorry I am. And ask if there's any way forward from here. Emily wiped her eyes. I don't know if there is. I don't know if I can forgive you. My parents, the Pattersons, they passed away 3 years ago. Car accident. They were the only family I had, and now they're gone. When I found out about Sarah, about you, I thought maybe I could have a family again. But this family was built on a lie. Not all of it was a lie, Sarah said carefully. She seemed to be processing everything, trying to find her footing in this new reality. Emily, you and I. We didn't lie to each other. We didn't even know about each other. Whatever happens with her, she gestured at me without looking at me, that doesn't have to define our relationship. Emily looked at Sarah with such longing it broke my heart all over again. Do you want a relationship with me? I don't know, Sarah admitted. This is all so overwhelming. But I think I'd like to try. I'd like to get to know my sister. For the first time since Emily had walked into the cafe, I saw a genuine smile cross her face. It transformed her, made her look younger, hopeful. I'd like that too, Emily whispered. They reached across the table and held hands, and I watched my two daughters, the one I had raised and the one I had given away, begin to build a bridge across the chasm I had created. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt the full weight of what I had stolen from them. Not just the past, but the future they could have had. The childhood memories, the shared secrets, the sisterly bond that should have been there from the very beginning. There's something else you should know, Emily said after a moment. The reason I was so desperate to find family, to connect with you both. I'm sick. Sarah's hand tightened around Emily's. What do you mean, sick? I was diagnosed with a rare genetic disorder about a year ago. It's called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. It affects connective tissue. My doctors said it's hereditary. Which is another reason I wanted to find my biological family. To understand my medical history. I felt the blood drain from my face. Is it? Are you? I'm managing it, Emily said. But it's progressive. It affects my joints, my heart, my digestive system. I needed to know if there were other cases in the family. If there were treatments that had worked for relatives. But more than that, I realized that life is short. Unpredictable. I didn't want to die without knowing where I came from. Without meeting my sister. Sarah looked stricken. Oh my God, Emily. I'm so sorry. Is there anything we can do? Actually, yes. I need to do more genetic testing. And having a biological relative to test against would be incredibly helpful. Would you be willing to do a genetic panel with me? Of course, Sarah said immediately. Whatever you need. They started talking about doctors and specialists. And I sat there feeling utterly helpless. My daughter, the daughter I had abandoned, was sick. And there was nothing I could do to fix it. Just like there was nothing I could do to fix the 32 years she had lost. After another hour, we all stood up to leave. Emily looked at me, her expression unreadable. I can't promise that I'll ever forgive you, she said. But I'm willing to try to understand. Maybe someday we can have some kind of relationship. But right now, I need to focus on getting to know Sarah. I understand, I said. Thank you for giving me even that much. She nodded and turned to Sarah. Can I give you my number? Maybe we could have lunch sometime. Just the two of us. I'd like that, Sarah said. They exchanged information, and then Emily left. Glancing back once at Sarah before walking out the door. Sarah and I stood there in the cafe, alone together. For the first time since this all began. I'm going to need some time, Sarah said without looking at me. I'm still so angry with you. But I understand why you did what you did, even if I don't agree with it. I need to process all of this. Take all the time you need, I said. I'll be here whenever you're ready. She nodded and walked out, leaving me standing alone in the cafe, surrounded by strangers living their normal lives. While mine continued to fall apart. I texted Thomas, and he met me outside Powell's. He didn't ask questions, just put his arm around me. And walked me back to the car. On the drive home, I told him everything that had happened. She's sick, I said, my voice breaking. My daughter is sick, and I wasn't there. I've never been there for her. You're there now, Thomas said. That's what matters. But was it? Was being there now enough to make up for 32 years of absence? Could anything ever be enough? 3 weeks passed before Sarah reached out to me again. 3 weeks of agonizing silence, of watching my phone. And hoping for a message that didn't come. Thomas tried to keep me busy with projects around the house. But I was barely present, going through the motions of life while my mind stayed stuck in that cafe. Replaying everything that had been said. Emily and Sarah, meanwhile, were building a relationship. I knew this because Thomas stayed in touch with David, who reported that the sisters were meeting regularly. Coffee dates, lunch, walks along the waterfront. They were discovering each other. Finding the connection that should have been there all along. I was happy for them. Truly, I was. But it also hurt, knowing that I was excluded from their growing bond. Knowing that I was the reason they had been separated in the first place. Then, on a gray November morning, Sarah called. Mom, can you come over to my place? My heart leapt. Of course. When? Now, if you can. Emily's here too. We want to talk to you. Together. I was out the door in 5 minutes, barely remembering to grab my purse. Thomas drove me to Sarah and David's condo in the south waterfront, and I stood outside their building. Looking up at the sleek glass tower. Trying to prepare myself for whatever was about to happen. Sarah buzzed me up, and I rode the elevator to the 15th floor. My heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. When the door opened, both Sarah and Emily were standing there, side by side. Identical expressions of nervous determination on their faces. Come in, Sarah said. The condo was modern and minimalist, all clean lines and neutral colors. I had always loved visiting here, but now it felt unfamiliar, like I was stepping into foreign territory. Where I wasn't sure I was welcome. We sat in the living room, me on one end of the sectional. The twins on the other. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Emily said, these past few weeks. Sarah and I have been getting to know each other. Really getting to know each other. And it's been amazing and heartbreaking at the same time. Amazing because we click, Sarah continued. We finish each other's sentences. We like the same foods, the same music. We have the same nervous habits. It's like finding a piece of myself I didn't know was missing. But heartbreaking, Emily said, because we keep thinking about all the years we lost. All the moments we should have shared. First days of school, high school proms, college graduation. Sarah got married, and I wasn't there. I went through my parents' death, and Sarah wasn't there. I nodded, tears already forming. I know what I took from you both. We've been angry, Sarah said. So angry. At you, at the situation, at the unfairness of it all. But we've also been talking a lot about what it must have been like for you. A 23-year-old single mother in the early 90s. Pregnant with twins by a married man. We're not excusing what you did, Emily added quickly. But we're trying to understand it. And more importantly, we're trying to figure out if we can move forward. I've been in therapy, Sarah said. Processing all of this. My therapist said something that stuck with me. She said that forgiveness isn't about saying what happened was okay. It's about releasing the burden of anger so it doesn't poison your own life. I've been in therapy too, Emily said. Since my diagnosis. And my therapist said something similar. She said that holding onto resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. They looked at each other, and some wordless communication passed between them. Then they both looked at me. Mom, Sarah said, and my heart broke a little. Because she still called me that. We want to move forward. But we need some things from you first. Anything, I said immediately. Whatever you need. We need the whole truth, Emily said. Not just the sanitized version. We need to know about our father. Who he was, where he is now. We need to know exactly what happened, from the beginning. I took a deep breath. This was the part one had been avoiding, the details I had never wanted to share. But they deserved the truth. All of it. His name was Richard Brennan, I began. I met him when I was working as a waitress in Boise, Idaho. He was a businessman, 15 years older than me, charming and sophisticated. Everything I wasn't. He came into the diner regularly, and he always sat in my section. We started talking. He flirted. I was young and stupid and flattered. Did you know he was married? Sarah asked. Not at first. He didn't wear a ring. He never mentioned a wife. But after a few weeks, one of the other waitresses told me. By then, I was already falling for him. I stared at my hands, remembering that foolish young woman I had been. He fed me all the classic lines. His marriage was over. His wife didn't understand him. They were staying together for the kids. He was going to leave her. I believed every word because I wanted to believe it. How long did it last? Emily asked. 4 months. We would meet at a motel outside of town. He would come to my apartment when he said he was working late. It felt like a romance, like we were. Romeo and Juliet, forbidden lovers fighting against the world. I laughed bitterly. God, I was such an idiot. When I told him I was pregnant, he didn't even hesitate. He said, "You need to take care of it." That was his exact phrase. Take care of it. Like you were both just a problem to be solved. When I said I couldn't do that I wanted to keep the baby. He gave me $2,000 in cash and told me I would never see him again. And I didn't. Do you know where he is now? Sarah asked. I looked him up a few years ago, out of curiosity. He's still in Boise. Still married to the same woman. They have 3 grown children, several grandchildren. He runs a successful real estate business. From what I could tell, he lives a perfectly respectable life. Does he know about us? Emily asked. He knows I was pregnant. He doesn't know I had twins. He doesn't know I kept one and gave one away. He probably assumed I took care of it, like he told me to. Emily's face hardened. He just abandoned you. Abandoned us. Yes. But I made my own choices after that. I could have kept you both. It would have been hard, maybe impossible, but other women have done it. I was just too scared. Too ashamed. I let fear make my decisions, and you both paid the price. Sarah stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the gray Portland skyline. I've spent the last 3 weeks thinking about what it would have been like if you had kept us both. Growing up poor, maybe in foster care if you couldn't manage. Maybe being separated anyway if child services got involved. Maybe having a mother who was so overwhelmed and resentful that she made our lives miserable. She turned back to look at me. I'm not saying you made the right choice. But I'm saying I understand that there were no good choices. Just less bad ones. Emily nodded slowly. I had a good childhood with the Pattersons. They loved me fiercely. They gave me opportunities I never would have had otherwise. Private school, music lessons, college with no debt. A stable, happy home. If you had kept us both, I wouldn't have had any of that. But you would have had each other, I said. You would have had a sister. That's worth more than private school. Maybe, Sarah said. Or maybe we would have ended up resenting each other, fighting over limited resources. Competing for a mother's attention that was already stretched too thin. We'll never know. She came back to the couch and sat down next to Emily. They reached for each other's hands instinctively. And I saw the bond that had formed between them in just a few short weeks. The point is, Emily said, we can't change the past. We can only decide what we do now. And we've decided, Sarah said, that we want to try. We want to try to be a family. All of us together. I looked at them, hardly daring to believe what I was hearing. You want me to be part of this? We want to try, Emily emphasized. It's not going to be easy. There's a lot of hurt to work through. A lot of trust to rebuild. But we're willing to try if you are. Yes, I said, tears streaming down my face now. Yes, I want to try. I want to be part of your lives, both of you. I want to make up for lost time, as much as I possibly can. Sarah stood up and came over to me. She sat down next to me, and after a moment, she put her arms around me. I broke down completely, sobbing into her shoulder. I'm so sorry, I kept saying. I'm so sorry. I know, Mom, I know. Then Emily was there too, and my 2 daughters were embracing me. And we were all crying together. 32 years of separation, of pain, of unanswered questions. All coming out in tears and trembling shoulders. I'm sorry I wasn't there when your parents died, I said to Emily. I'm sorry you had to go through that alone. I'm sorry I accused you of cheating, David's voice said from the doorway. I had been so caught up in the moment I hadn't even heard him come in. He was standing there with Thomas, who must have come up after me. David walked over and knelt down in front of us. Sarah, Emily, Margaret, I'm sorry for not believing, for not understanding. This is all so beyond anything I could have imagined. You had every right to be suspicious, Emily said, wiping her eyes. I was acting shady. I should have just introduced myself from the beginning, instead of lurking around like some creepy stalker. You weren't creepy, Sarah said, squeezing her sister's hand. You were scared. We all were. Thomas came over and put his hand on my shoulder. I think this calls for a family dinner. What do you say we order in, open some wine, and start figuring out what being a family actually looks like? And so we did. We ordered Thai food and sat around Sarah and David's dining table, the 5 of us. This strange, patchwork family that had been broken apart, and was now, tentatively, trying to piece itself back together. Emily told stories about growing up with the Pattersons, about family vacations to national parks, and her mother's terrible cooking, and her father's awful dad jokes. Sarah told stories about her childhood, about Thomas teaching her how to use tools and me helping her with school projects and the time she accidentally set the kitchen on fire, trying to make breakfast in bed for Mother's Day. And slowly, the girls started finding the common threads. They both hated cilantro. They both loved thunderstorms. They both had a habit of organizing things by color. They both talked with their hands when they got excited. We're like a nature versus nurture experiment, Emily said at one point. Same genetics, completely different environments. And yet we're still so similar. It's weird, Sarah agreed. But also kind of wonderful. As the evening wore on, and the wine bottles emptied, I found myself just watching them. These 2 beautiful women, created from the same genetic material, separated by my fear and now reunited despite it. They were so alike and yet so different. Sarah was more outgoing, quicker to laugh. Emily was more thoughtful, measuring her words carefully. But together, they seemed to balance each other perfectly. Thank you, I said suddenly, interrupting a story Emily was telling about her college years. Thank you both for giving me this chance. I don't deserve it, but I'm grateful for it. Emily looked at me, her expression serious. You're right, you don't deserve it, but we're not doing this for you. We're doing it for us. Sarah and I, we want to know our biological mother. We want to understand where we came from. And maybe, if we all work really hard at this, we can build something good out of the mess you created. It wasn't a warm, fuzzy declaration of forgiveness. But it was honest, and it was real. And it was more than I had any right to hope for. I'll take it, I said. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn your trust. Good, Sarah said, because we're going to hold you to that. David raised his glass. To new beginnings. To second chances. To family, however we define it. We all clinked glasses, and I saw Thomas looking at me with pride in his eyes. He had stood by me through everything, never judging, always supporting. He had loved Sarah as his own daughter. And now he was ready to welcome Emily into our family too. As we cleaned up the dinner dishes together, laughing and talking over each other, I allowed myself to feel something I hadn't felt in 3 decades: hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, something good could come from the ashes of my past mistakes. Hope that these two incredible women could find their way to being true sisters. Hope that I could be part of their lives, even if only at the margins. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks and difficult conversations. Emily's illness loomed over everything. A reminder that time was precious and uncertain. But for now, for tonight, we were together. We were trying. We were a family. And that was enough. The next 6 months were a journey unlike anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't a smooth, linear path toward healing. It was messy and complicated, full of steps forward and steps back, of good days and terrible days. Emily's health became our immediate concern. Sarah insisted on going to every doctor's appointment. With her, learning everything she could about Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. The genetic testing revealed that the condition had indeed been passed down through my family. My grandmother had suffered from unexplained joint pain and heart problems, though it had never been properly diagnosed. So it came from you, Emily said when we got the results. There was no accusation in her voice, just a statement of fact. But I felt the weight of it anyway. One more thing I had given her that she hadn't asked for. Sarah tested negative for the severe form of EDS, though she had some of the minor markers. The genetic counselor said she should be monitored, but would likely never develop significant symptoms. Why me and not you? Emily asked Sarah one evening, as we all sat in my living room. It had become our weekly ritual: Thursday night dinners at my and Thomas's house, where we would cook together and talk about our weeks. Random chance, Sarah said. Genetic lottery. The same reason we ended up with different families in the first place. Sometimes life is just arbitrary and unfair. But Sarah refused to let Emily face it alone. She organized fundraisers for EDS research. She joined support groups. She learned about adaptive equipment and treatments. She became Emily's fiercest advocate and most loyal supporter. Watching them together, I saw what sisters should be. What they would have been all along if I hadn't interfered. You're staring again, Thomas would say gently when he caught me. Watching them with tears in my eyes. I can't help it. Look at them. They're so close now. They are. You gave them that, even if it took 32 years to get here. But not everyone in our newly formed family found forgiveness so easily. Emily's relationship with me remained cordial but distant. She called me Margaret, never Mom. She participated in family dinners and holidays, but kept an emotional wall between us. One day, about 4 months into our reunion, I asked her directly, Emily, do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me? We were alone in the kitchen, cleaning up after lunch. Sarah and David had gone to pick up dessert, and Thomas was in the garage. Emily stopped washing the dish in her hands and stared out the window over the sink. I don't know. I want to. I see how much you love Sarah, how much you love Thomas. I see that you're not a monster, just a scared person who made a terrible choice. But every time I look at you, I think about my parents. The Pattersons. I think about how much they loved me, how hard they tried to give me a good life. And I wonder if it's a betrayal to them to accept you as my mother. They are your mother and father, I said firmly. I'm just the woman who gave birth to you. They're the ones who raised you, who loved you, who made you who you are. Then what are you? Emily asked, turning to look at me. It was a fair question. What was I to her? I'm the beginning of your story, I said finally. The first chapter. But they wrote the rest of the book. I'm part of where you came from, but they're who made you who you are. Emily's eyes filled with tears. I miss them so much. Every day, I miss them. And when you hug Sarah, when you have those mother-daughter moments with her, I feel angry. Not at you, exactly, but at the universe. At the unfairness of it all. She gets you, and I lost the parents I actually knew. I know, I said. And I'm sorry. I can never replace them, and I wouldn't want to. But I can be here now, if you'll let me. Not as a replacement, but as an addition. Another person who loves you and wants the best for you. She wiped her eyes. I'm working on it, with my therapist. She says forgiveness is a process, not a destination. Some days I feel close to it, and other days I feel like I'll never get there. Take all the time you need, I told her. I'm not going anywhere. The turning point came in July. Almost 8 months after that first meeting in the cafe. Emily was in the hospital for a procedure related to her condition, a routine surgery to repair some damaged tissue in her shoulder. Sarah and I were both in the waiting room, along with David and Thomas. The surgery took longer than expected. What should have been 2 hours stretched to 4, then 5. With each passing hour, Sarah became more agitated, pacing the waiting room, checking with the nurses every 15 minutes. Something's wrong, she kept saying. Something's gone wrong. I tried to comfort her, but I was terrified too. What if we had just found Emily only to lose her? What if my daughter, the one I had given away, the one I had only just begun to know, died before we could fully heal the rift between us? Finally, the surgeon came out. He looked tired but not worried. She's fine. There were some complications. Her tissues are more fragile than we anticipated, which is common with EDS. But we were able to complete the repair. She's in recovery now. The relief was overwhelming. Sarah burst into tears, and David held her while she sobbed. I sat down heavily in a chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. When they finally let us see her, Emily was groggy but awake. She smiled weakly when she saw Sarah. "Hey, sis. Don't ever scare me like that again," Sarah said, grabbing her hand. "I'll try not to." Emily's eyes found me standing in the doorway. "Margaret, you're here too?" "Of course I'm here. Where else would I be?" Something shifted in her expression. "You stayed. All those hours, you stayed in the waiting room." "Of course I did. You're my daughter." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "When I woke up after my parents died, I was in the hospital then too. From the same accident, there was no one there. I woke up alone, and I found out they were gone, and I was alone. I thought I would always be alone." "You're not alone," Sarah said fiercely. "You'll never be alone again. You've got me." "And me," David added. "And us," Thomas said, standing next to me. "And me," I said softly. "If you want me." Emily looked at me for a long moment, and then she nodded. Yeah, I think I do." It wasn't a dramatic declaration of forgiveness. There were no movie-style speeches or dramatic music. But it was a beginning. A real one this time. Over the next few months, Emily started calling me occasionally. Just to chat, to ask for advice, to share something funny that had happened. She started coming to Sunday dinners at our house. Just her and Sarah, where we would cook together and talk about everything and nothing. She still called me Margaret, not Mom, and I was okay with that. I had been Mom to Sarah her whole life. I could be Margaret to Emily, a different role, but no less important. For Sarah's birthday that year, we threw a big party at my and Thomas's house. Friends, colleagues, neighbors, everyone who mattered to Sarah and David. But the best gift came when Emily stood up to make a toast. 32 years ago, Emily began. Sarah and I entered this world together. And then immediately, we were separated. We should have grown up together. Should have had all the experiences that sisters have. We didn't get that, and that's a tragedy. But here's what I've learned over the past year. Family isn't just about biology or shared history. It's about choosing to show up for each other. It's about forgiveness and second chances. It's about love, even when it's hard. She looked at me, and I saw tears in her eyes. "Margaret, you made a choice 32 years ago that hurt both your daughters. But you also gave me a gift, even if you didn't mean to. You gave me to the Pattersons, and they gave me a beautiful life. And now, you've given me Sarah. You've given me a sister, and that's more precious than you could ever know." She turned to Sarah. "Sis, meeting you has been the best thing that's happened to me since I lost my parents. You've filled a hole in my life I didn't even know was there. I love you." "I love you too," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. Emily raised her glass. To Sarah, on her birthday. To family, in all its complicated, messy, beautiful forms. And to second chances, may we all be brave enough to take them. We all raised our glasses, and I caught Thomas's eye. He smiled at me, that warm, proud smile that said he knew how far I had come, how much I had healed. After the party, after everyone had left, Sarah and Emily and I sat on the back porch, watching the sun set over Portland. The girls were talking and laughing, finishing each other's sentences the way they always did now. I'm proud of you both, I said suddenly. They stopped talking and looked at me. I know I don't have the right to be proud. I didn't earn it, but watching you two navigate this impossible situation, watching you choose each other despite everything, it's been the greatest privilege of my life. Sarah reached over and squeezed my hand. You're still our mother, Mom. Even with all the mistakes, even with all the pain, you're still our mother. Emily didn't say anything, but she didn't pull away either. She sat there, part of our circle, and that was enough. As autumn turned to winter, our family settled into new rhythms. Emily started dating someone, a kind man named Marcus, who worked as a physical therapist and understood her medical limitations. Sarah and David started talking about trying for a baby, which sent all of us into excited speculation about what it would be like to have a new generation. If you have a daughter, Emily said one evening, she'll have an aunt who looks exactly like her mother. That's going to be confusing. If you have a daughter, Sarah countered, she'll have the same thing. They both laughed, and I realized with a start that they were talking about the future. A future where we would all be together, where their children would grow up knowing each other, where the fracture I had created would be healed in the next generation. On Christmas morning, we all gathered at my and Thomas's house. The living room was full of presents and noise and laughter. Thomas made his famous pancakes while the girls opened stockings, and David set up a complicated new camera he'd gotten. Emily handed me a small wrapped box. This is from both of us, she said, gesturing to include Sarah. I opened it carefully. Inside was a silver locket on a delicate chain. When I opened the locket, there were two tiny photos inside, one of Sarah as a baby, one of Emily as a baby. Nearly identical except for the different clothes and backgrounds. We thought you should have both of us, Sarah explained. The way it should have been from the beginning. I couldn't speak. I just held the locket and cried while my daughters hugged me from both sides. Thank you, I finally managed. Thank you for forgiving me. Thank you for letting me be part of your lives. We're not saying everything's perfect, Emily said. We're not saying all the hurt is gone. But we're saying we're willing to try. We're willing to build something new from the broken pieces. That's all I could ever ask for, I said. Later, after dinner, after the dishes were done, and everyone was lounging around in food comas, Emily approached me in the kitchen where I was making coffee. Margaret, she said quietly. I turned to look at her, and I saw something different in her expression. Something softer. I've been thinking, she continued, about what to call you. Margaret feels too formal now, but Mom feels like it belongs to Sarah. And to the Pattersons. You can call me whatever feels right to you, I said. There's no wrong answer. She nodded slowly. What if I called you Mama? That way. It's different from what Sarah calls you, but it still acknowledges that you're my mother too. My biological mother, at least. My throat tightened. I would be honored. Truly honored. Okay, she said, and smiled. Okay, Mama. It was such a small thing, one word. But it felt like the world shifting on its axis. It felt like redemption, like grace I didn't deserve but was receiving anyway. That night, as Thomas and I lay in bed, I told him about the locket and about Emily calling me Mama. You did it, he said. You brought them together. They brought themselves together, I corrected. I just stopped standing in their way. You did more than that. You faced your past. You told the truth. You accepted responsibility. That takes courage. It took having my hand forced, I said honestly. If Emily hadn't found us, I would have taken the secret to my grave. Maybe, but when you were forced to face it, you didn't run. You didn't make excuses. You owned what you'd done and tried to make it right. That counts for something. I thought about the young woman I had been 32 years ago, alone and terrified, making an impossible choice. I thought about the woman I had become, carrying that secret like a stone in my chest, letting guilt poison every happy moment. And I thought about who I was now, still flawed, still marked by my mistakes, but trying. Always trying. Do you think people can change? I asked Thomas. Do you think we can ever really make up for our past mistakes? I think we can try, he said. And I think the trying matters. Look at your daughters, Margaret. Look at what they've built together despite everything. You gave them that opportunity, even if it took 32 years to get here. As I drifted off to sleep, I thought about the journey we'd been on. From that moment in the hospital when I held 2 babies and made a terrible choice, to the cafe where 3 women met and began to heal, to this Christmas night, with a locket around my neck containing photos of both my daughters. The road had been long and painful. There were still scars, still moments of difficulty and hurt feelings. Emily's illness was an ongoing concern that shadowed all our lives. The lost years could never be recovered. But we were together. We were trying. We were family. And perhaps that was the real meaning of forgiveness, not forgetting what happened, not pretending the hurt didn't exist, but choosing to move forward anyway. Choosing to build something new from the wreckage of the past. Sarah and Emily were doing that. They were creating a sisterhood. That was all the more precious because it had been nearly lost. They were writing a new story, one where biology and choice both mattered. Where the past informed the present but didn't define it. And I was being allowed to be part of that story. Not as the hero. I would never be the hero of this tale. But as a supporting character, someone who had made terrible mistakes, but was being given the chance to witness and celebrate the beautiful thing that was growing from those mistakes. In the end, maybe that was all any of us could hope for. Not to erase our sins, not to undo our choices, but to learn from them. To grow, to do better, to love the people in front of us with everything we have. For as long as we have them. The next morning, I woke to my phone buzzing with a group text. Sarah and Emily had created a new group chat called The Sullivan Sisters. Mama. Sarah, good morning. Who wants to go to brunch? Emily, only if we can go to that place with the good French toast. Sarah, deal. Mama, you in? I looked at that message for a long moment, at my daughters, including me in their plans, at the name they had chosen for me in their phones. Margaret, I'm in. Always. As I got dressed and ready to meet them, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. I looked older than I had a year ago. The stress and emotion had taken their toll. But there was something different in my eyes too. Something lighter. The weight I had carried for so long was still there. But it was easier to bear now. Shared weight, distributed among 3 women instead of crushing one. I touched the locket around my neck, feeling the weight of it, the precious burden of these 2 lives I had brought into the world. Thank you, I whispered, though I wasn't sure who I was thanking. God? Fate? My daughters? All of the above? Thank you for second chances. Thank you for forgiveness I don't deserve. Thank you for family. When I arrived at the restaurant, Sarah and Emily were already there. Sitting side by side in a booth. Their heads bent together over Emily's phone, laughing at something. They looked up when I approached. And they both smiled, those identical smiles that still took my breath away. Hey, Mama, Emily said. Hey, Mom, Sarah said. And I slid into the booth across from them, these 2 miracles. These 2 chances at redemption, and thought this is what grace looks like. This is what it means to be forgiven. This is what family is, messy and complicated. And built from broken pieces, but family nonetheless. So, Sarah said, passing me a menu. Emily and I have been talking, and we have an idea. Oh, I said, curious. We want to find him, Emily said. Our biological father, Richard Brennan. My stomach dropped. Why would you want to find him? He abandoned you. He gave me money to take care of the problem and walked away. We know, Sarah said. But he's part of our story too. And we have half-siblings we've never met. We want to know them. We want to understand where we come from, all of it. The good and the bad. I wanted to argue, to protect them from the disappointment I knew awaited them. Richard Brennan had never wanted children with me. He had never asked about them, never tried to find out what happened. But looking at my daughters' determined faces, I realized this wasn't my choice to make. Okay, I said. If that's what you want, I'll help you. I'll tell you everything I know. Emily reached across the table and took my hand. We know this is hard for you. But we need to do this. We need to close this loop. I understand, I said. And I did. This was part of their healing, their journey. My discomfort didn't matter. Sarah took my other hand, and for a moment, the 3 of us sat there, connected across the table. A chain of 3 generations of choices and consequences. Whatever happens, Sarah said, we're doing this together. As a family. As a family, Emily echoed. As a family, I agreed. And in that moment, despite everything, the pain, the loss, the decades of separation, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. Not the fragile, tentative hope of the past months, but something stronger. Something unbreakable. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't about my guilt or my redemption. It was about 2 incredible women who had found each other against all odds. Who had chosen love over anger, forgiveness over resentment, future over past. They were writing their own story now. And I was just grateful to have a small part in it. The truth hadn't torn us apart. It had, impossibly, beautifully, brought us together. And whatever came next, whether Richard Brennan welcomed them or rejected them again, whether Emily's health improved or declined, whether new challenges arose, we would face it together. We were family. Broken, imperfect, hard-won family. But family nonetheless. And that, I realized as I sat there with my daughter's hands in mine, was worth everything. All the pain, all the years of guilt, all the sleepless nights, it was all worth it to arrive at this moment, at this table. With these 2 extraordinary women who had somehow found it in their hearts to forgive me. So, Emily said, breaking the moment with a grin. Who's ready to order? Because I'm starving. And if I don't get French toast in the next 5 minutes, there's going to be trouble. We laughed, and ordered, and spent the next hour talking and eating and being together. 3 women connected by blood and choice, by pain and healing, by the past and the future. And for the first time in 32 years, I felt whole.